So this was brought to my attention a couple of days ago, or a day or so ago. I don't know. Time means nothing to me anymore. Renegade Cut made a video on joining the military, and apparently it was pretty bad. By apparently, I mean it was pretty bad. I watched it, and it was pretty bad. Before we get into it, I did want to go over a tweet thread that was made. This was what I first saw that kind of alerted me to this. I wouldn't have saw the video on Twitter because I am, in fact, blocked by Renegade Cut because he blocked basically anyone who was even remotely associated with some like other content creator. I don't know, something Vosh, I think. They're all just Saige clones. But Renegade Cut basically blocked anyone who was even vaguely associated with Vosh. I am unfortunately blocked by Renegade Cut, so I wouldn't have actually seen the video through Twitter. But I did see this tweet thread about it. And I do kind of want to go over it because we're going to talk about why I dislike this video. So this is Rico Rants. So I believe, if I remember correctly, I actually remember listening or watching one of Vosh's videos. My response to Renegade Cut, video pending. Please read the full thread before responding. I thought it was pretty good. So, in a better world, joining the military wouldn't be necessary. In a better world, I'd have never had to join to get out of poverty. I wish we lived in that world, but we don't. My problem with Renegade Cut and everyone else like him is y'all imagine we already live in such a world. The very foundation of your argument hinges on a world where a military isn't necessary, so it wouldn't be a problem for our country or our allies if no one joined. This is true, by the way. Everything in these two tweets already 100% true. The main criticism that I'm going to get here, and this is a criticism that I generally have a lot of the times with people in Renegade Cut's circles, is the fact that all of these arguments hinge on utopian ideas. We don't live in a world where we don't have to fear being strong-armed by someone else's military for some reason or another. Think of our resources and the value of our currency versus theirs. Again, true. We don't live in a world where invasion of our country or our allies or sovereign nations is impossible. See Russia invading Ukraine. We live in a world where our military guarantees two things: the US dollar and international protection. Things I'm now convinced that many of y'all take for granted. Y'all think we could all just stop joining the military while everything remains the same? Hell, think of the war over water that's inevitably coming. You all think that having no one in our military would be a good thing during that? In this world where our resources are not equitably distributed, and there are strongmen who want it all, y'all think that no one should join our military. Going back to Russia versus Ukraine, understand that Ukraine would have been flattened by now if not for our military intelligence, logistics, and equipment. Are you all cool with that? If y'all think our global order is fucked up and wrong, look into the imperialism of China and Russia. They're not any better. So if your opposition is to our imperialism, well, I hate to break it to you, but someone is going to be in power, and I'd rather it be us. And I know that our military has been used for bad things, to fight unjust wars, see Iraq, to maintain control of resources at the expense of local populace, see Honduras, Banana Republic, to stamp out dissent domestically, see Kent State shootings. I know that our military is rife with problems, see Renegade Cut's video for a litany of examples. So I don't blame people for fearing the military or being morally opposed to joining it. I get that, but someone has to. For the rare but pivotal times that we get it right, like with Ukraine, someone has to be there to facilitate that. For the defense we provide to our allies, someone has to ensure that. For the humanitarian aid we provide, someone has to provide it. It's either going to be us or it's going to be someone else. I'd rather it be us. Lastly, to the notion that we can't change the military for the better, that we can't fix or at least lessen the amount of problems the military has, I think that's stupid. Like everything else in our country, the military has improved with each new generation. Sexual assault is actually taken seriously. Sexual harassment, abuse of power, improper training, non-combat related injuries, allowing women, minorities, and LGBT people to serve. You name it, and you'll find we've markedly improved compared to just 10 years ago alone. I said this before and I'll say it again. I'm glad the military is increasingly taking sleep apnea seriously because it is ridiculously common and negatively affects you in various ways. Things can change, but they're not going to if we never engage with it. If we cede our institutions to bad actors or worse, fanatical nut jobs who will inevitably make things worse. Imagine if Trump fanatics ran our military during J6 or during the 2020 BLM protests. Thank God that wasn't the case. And not through lack of trying on Trump's part. His administration did outright try to weed out anyone who was insufficiently loyal to him from the DoD. And best believe Republicans will try again given the opportunity to do so, see Chris Rufo. We should want to oppose that. We should strive to, at worst, keep our institutions relatively neutral, or at best, change our institutions into vehicles for positive change domestically and abroad. These things can happen, so I will not accept the idea that they can't. So am I saying people should join the military? Yes. Yes, I am. I'm not some brainwashed dog of the military. I know the score and I know the risks. Even still, I believe in our military. I believe in the good it could do if in the right hands. And although these ideas may not be popular on the left, see anti-imperialism, or the right, see isolationism and anti-wokeness, currently, I truly do not give a shit. Call me whatever you all want, but I will stand by this belief until the day I die. The military saved my life. It changed me for the better. I believe that it can do the same for others. That is all for now. Okay, so I want to be perfectly clear. I do not agree with everything in this thread, okay? That is coming as somebody who has not served in the military, so take that for what it is. But the overall criticism of Renegade Cut's video here, I think, is pretty salient. We're going to watch some of the clips of Renegade Cut's video because there are some things that I want to point out, some problems with it, and the overall moralization that Renegade Cut engages in that I do not think is helpful. One of the rare moments I wish I was on stream talking about a topic I have words. Honestly, Rain, I almost reached out to you. I just didn't have time because I really do want to hear your thoughts on this. All right, well, I can bring you on if you would like, or we can talk later. But I am going to watch this. After we watch this, I would definitely be willing to bring you on. Might have to do some finagling though. Okay, so I do want to go over specific parts of the video, by the way. I've already watched it. I've already gone over some of it. I want to look at specific points. So we're not watching the whole thing. I'm just going over a couple of details. I don't think the point of his video was we should abolish the military. I think his point was more the narrative about the military is built on lies. Don't listen to what they say. I disagree, and there's two reasons for that. Renegade Cut, first of all, is an anarchist. Like, he just is. He has said so multiple times in his videos. The point of his video is to prevent people from joining the military. He says so multiple times in the video, do not join the military. If nobody joined the military, the natural conclusion to that is to abolish the military. The other reason is I don't think Renegade Cut is being honest in his critique. I think Renegade Cut has an ideological leaning against the military, which is fine. I have an ideological leaning against the military. But I think Renegade Cut refuses to acknowledge those biases when he's making these videos, to the point that he does make some fairly false claims. I do want to make it clear, though, by the way, that I don't disagree with the overall political prescription of criticizing the military. That is not my goal here. I'm not here to defend the military. I am here to criticize a bad video. I look forward to seeing what you're talking about. I won't deny I took pretty much everything you said at face value. Well, good thing I am here then.
To its widespread unpopularity during the Vietnam War, so they squeeze every minute of combat time possible from their recruits. These outcomes are the best case scenarios, and they are still pretty terrible. What about scenarios besides the best case? Well, you will probably be injured, possibly severely. Almost 50% of U.S. servicemen are injured every year. According to the Defense Centers for Public Health, that is over 2 million medical encounters. You might be thinking, oh, less than 50%, so I probably won't be injured.
Okay, before he continues, this claim is that nearly 50% of servicemen are injured every single year. I and Paco did a little bit of digging, okay? Luckily, Renegade Cut does cite some sources in the description of the video. One of those sources talks about injuries, causes, risk factors. The source that Renegade Cut cites, by the way, think this is, yeah. Renegade Cut is framing this very dishonestly. The way that Renegade Cut is framing this is that if you join the military, you are going to get severely injured. The issue is that more than half of the injuries that are caused are exercise or sports related. Because the military calculates injuries based on active service. It's not just combat related injuries that are being calculated in that statistic. This is dishonest framing because it does make it seem like there is a higher likelihood of injury than there actually is. And it's trying to make it seem like you join the military, you're going to like get shot in combat. And no, by the way, again, the reason that I'm pointing this out is not because I think that it's good that there are a lot of injuries within the military, or that I think that there isn't a high likelihood of getting injured while in the military. The reason I'm pointing this out is that this is dishonest framing. And I think that Renegade Cut is doing essentially the reverse version of what the military does in their advocacy to try to recruit people. Renegade Cut is being dishonest in the way that he's framing things in order to try to convince people to not join the military.
And that's each year, and you signed up for 8. You have to play those 50-50 odds every year, and it is statistically bonkers that you could actually get through your entire contract without an injury.
Does that mean that if you get into a car accident on active duty stateside, it counts in that statistic? I do believe so, yes.
Now, admittedly, not all of these injuries are catastrophic, but a lot of them are. Many of these injuries result...
I wanted to point this one out too.
The odds every year, and it is statistically bonkers that you could actually get through your entire contract without an injury. Now, admittedly, not all of these injuries are catastrophic, but a lot of them are. Many of these injuries result in permanent disabilities that you will have to deal with for the rest of your life. Don't count on your military health insurance and the Office of Veteran Affairs to take care of you all that well either. They are massively underfunded and understaffed because Congress loves funding war but seems to hate funding the health of people that they have tricked into going to war. There is a...
Okay, so again, I don't actually have a problem with the overall political view here. The way that we treat veterans is piss poor. I'm again attacking the framing. So the framing here, I would like to point out, we're talking about disability and the rate at which you are likely to deal with mental or physical disabilities after joining the military. I also take issue with the framing here. This clip that Renegade Cut has chosen to place over this, whereas Renegade Cut doesn't specifically talk about homelessness, the implication here is to add to that framing that you are going to probably end up with a disability or end up with a mental health condition, or in this case, will probably end up homeless. It is pretty true that homelessness is a problem among veterans. The deliberate choice to include this clip is supposed to put into your head that the homeless rate is also tied to this argument. And I looked into it. The best estimate that I can find puts less than 1% of the veteran population being homeless. Also, the rate of PTSD among veterans, which is, again, high. Not all veterans use VA healthcare, and we know that PTSD is more common among those who do. One study found that among veterans using VA care, 23 out of every 100, or 23%, had PTSD at some point in their lives, compared to 7 out of every 100, or 7%, who do not use the VA for healthcare. So it is a fairly high statistic. Of the 6 million veterans served in fiscal year 2021, about 10 out of every 100 men, or 10%, and 19 out of every 100 women, or 19%, were diagnosed with PTSD. It's fairly common. I don't want to understate that PTSD is a fairly common diagnosis with people who join the military. But again, Renegade Cut is framing this as if you join the military, it's almost a guarantee. This is also from the VA. New data shows 11% decline in veteran homelessness since 2020, the biggest drop in more than 5 years. This was something that I actually did see when doing the research. 55.3% reduction in veterans experiencing homelessness since 2010. So again.
Now, admittedly, not all of these injuries are catastrophic, but a lot of them are. Many of these injuries result in permanent disabilities that you will have to deal with for the rest of your life. Don't count on your military health insurance and the Office of Veteran Affairs to take care of you all that well.
Like was mentioned earlier, the phrase, a lot of them, is doing the heavy lifting here. In the article that Renegade Cut cites, almost 50% of military experience one or more injury each year. They result in over 2 million medical encounters annually across military services. So this is what Renegade Cut mentioned. Like, I believe he just read this word for word. Going down just a couple of bullet points. Most are overuse strains, sprains, and stress fractures, most to lower extremities, ankle and foot, knee and lower leg. More than half of these injuries are exercise or sports related, especially running. Back and shoulder injuries are also common, more often associated with lifting and carrying activities. Renegade Cut is being dishonest here. I am not suggesting that the military is good, by the way. I am, however, pointing out that Renegade Cut is being extremely bad in his research. He is smart enough to know better.
Loves funding war, but seems to hate funding the health of people that they have tricked into going to war. There is a really good chance that you will end up disabled and have to tell your story about why you're in a wheelchair to every nosy civilian who wants to feel better about themselves.
Okay, a really good chance. Those are the words he used. If I remember correctly. Okay, I apologize, the link is not working. Overall, what I was able to find, what Paco was able to find as well, was roughly 14% of vets end up with some form of severe disability. This is including physical and mental, by the way. So when Renegade Cut says there is a good chance is less than 15%. Now, statistically, that is going to be a little bit more broad because we're going to be talking about the entire military population. Post 9/11 veterans, I believe, have a much higher chance of experiencing some sort of disability, which is going to be the majority of people now. But that is still not a majority of people. I believe the statistic was in the realm of 40%, which is very high, but is not the probability that he is framing here. Because remember, he is saying, essentially, you are going to probably have this happen.
By thanking you for your service. It will be exhausting, and it will never end. It gets worse. Approximately 1 in 4 women serving in the military reports that they were sexually assaulted, typically by other servicemen. Their superiors often try to conceal sex crimes, which...
Okay. It is a long-standing thing. We know about the military. They are very bad about sexual assault. It does happen. It is very high. The military, to my understanding, does have a higher than average rate of sexual assault against women. However, I would like to also point out that that is compared to 1 in 6 civilian women. So we are talking a matter of degrees here. Renegade Cut is kind of making it seem like you are extremely uniquely likely to get assaulted in the military compared to anywhere else. This is not like a military issue, more so this is a cultural issue around sexual assault in women. If all the statistics Renegade Cut were citing were completely true and not misleading, would you still disagree with his message? I would disagree with the conclusion of his message, i.e. that the military shouldn't exist and you shouldn't join it. I would not disagree with the political prescription of the message that the military does do bad things.
The United States military serves the economic interests of the nation and diminishes the economic prosperity of other nations in a massive international and long-standing effort to maintain global hegemony or supremacy.
All right, I really, really need to state that this is a massive oversimplification of how foreign policy works. For one, and again, this is another contention I have with the framing, the military does not specifically and only serve the economic interests of the state. Framing it as if that is the primary purpose of the military, I think is misleading, and I think it's wrong.
Wars are generally fought over resources, over scarcity, but a superpower starting a war with a much smaller, poorer country is not doing so because of scarcity. The superpower does not do this because it has a lack of wealth. The superpower does this to hoard more wealth and deepen the unequal relationships between them, to enact trade deals that disproportionately benefit the superpower.
Very oversimplified.
Today, there are fewer superpowers, the US being chiefest among them. The US must maintain this status by deepening the disparity of poor nations and rich nations. They do this through a combination of military force and their disproportionate voting power in the International Monetary Fund and World Bank.
Okay, so like I said, this is a very massive oversimplification of geopolitics. It's also kind of wrong in a way, in the sense that nothing that Renegade Cut has said is necessarily technically untrue. But the way that he is framing it is as if this is the primary reason why the military exists. The US must maintain the status by deepening the disparity of poor nations and rich nations. For starters, this is not entirely true. While it is the case that under a capitalist system, there is going to be a tier of winners and losers to a degree, of countries that have more and countries that have less. It is not in the economic interests of the US all the time to ensure that every other country is poorer and poorer. The issue here is that we enact trade deals with other countries. Now, it is true that if countries are less wealthy than us, we can enact more economic control over them. However, the way that Renegade Cut is phrasing this, as if it is our goal to make other countries poorer, is wrong. It is our goal to ensure that other poorer countries don't catch up to us. We are not trying to make them poorer necessarily. We are trying to prevent them from getting richer. And those are two different things. The last thing that I want to touch on, okay, is something that I do have experience in. Renegade Cut ultimately at the end of his video talks about what you should do instead of joining the military.
Because you're the adult now. Your parents don't get to decide what you do with your life. Want to make some money? You can earn more working retail than as a private in the army, and you have almost no chance of committing a war crime unless you work at Hobby Lobby. Want to feel tough?
All right. That quote right there, I think, and we're not going to go through any more of the video, by the way. That quote right there, you can earn more working retail than as a private in the army. Okay? I would like to point out some very big flaws in the framing of that argument. Okay? Yeah, Rain, it is not true. First of all, here is where Renegade Cut is getting that number. Renegade Cut is looking at the Army private salary, which is, from what I can tell, a base pay of $23,000 a year. Now, it is true that you can, in theory, make more than $23,000 a year working in fast food or retail. However, what this argument fails to address and what this argument fails to point out is that $23,000 a year that you are getting being a private in the Army goes a hell of a lot farther. Okay? Do you know why? Ding, 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 Scout. It is because the Army also provides your housing, healthcare, and food. The cost of living is a factor in how much you're actually making and taking home at the end of the day. Somebody working as a private in the Army may be getting technically less money per year than someone working in retail or fast food, depending on the job, by the way. This is also talking about an average. So you could work somewhere and make less than this working in this industry, or you could work somewhere making more than this. I work in a relatively low cost of living area. And again, it depends on the job, depends on the situation, depends on your time in service. This is straight up not true. And even if I want to lend the absolute, most amount of charitability that I can to this, it is still misleading. Someone who is a private in the army is still probably better off than working retail or fast food because of the cost of living. So why am I talking about this? Ultimately, like, what is my point here? It was asked earlier if all of the information was technically correct. Would I still, like, disagree with this video? And as I said, my contention is not with the criticism of the military, because let me be clear, the military-industrial complex sucks. Yes, Alifnot, this has big suburban anarchist vibes, and I wonder why. Because suburban anarchist might actually be the best description of Renegade Cut and his content. This is very, very tabby, in my opinion. Because the problem with Renegade Cut's video is Renegade Cut will point out real problems in the military. I want to be clear with that. I am giving credit where it's due. Renegade Cut has pointed out actual problems. The issue is, at the end of this video, he gives incorrect information on the alternatives to military service, dismisses the reasons why people join the military to begin with, and also kind of implies that joining the military makes you a war criminal and makes you, by extension, morally a bad person. No, with Outro, it's not that Renegade Cut needed to consult with an expert or an editor. It's that Renegade Cut ultimately is baby's first anarchist in video essay form and is just being dishonest. I used to have a lot of respect for Renegade Cut because I generally do think he makes decent videos. The problem is he tends to oversimplify things and he refuses to address his own biases. He speaks as if his personal opinions and as if his personal feelings about a thing are just facts. And the sources that he's been citing don't even all agree with him. I would also like to point out a couple of things that I didn't actually go over in the analysis. Just a couple of little petty things. First off, Renegade Cut also fundamentally misunderstands how the oil market works. I'm just going to say that straight up. He just doesn't understand how the oil market works. He also makes the claim talking about military funding because he does this thing early in the video where he infantilizes people who want to join the military by basically saying, oh, it's fine, hun, you're all being like propagandized to. And like to justify that, he talks about how a lot of movies get military funding, which, by the way, is true. However, it's also worth noting that usually when movies get military funding, it's so that they can get permission to have military equipment shown in the film. The military does often get to sign off on final scripts in order to give that funding. But typically it is only so that they can ensure that the way the military itself is portrayed is in whatever like positive light. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because the example he gives is fucking Marvel movies. Most Marvel movies don't get military funding. There are a few reasons why. Most Marvel movies don't get military funding because most Marvel movies don't portray the military either at all or in that positive of a light. The ones that did get military funding, by the way, were Iron Man 1 and 2, Captain America 1 and 2, and Captain Marvel. And I want to point out that in those movies, the military was almost ambiguously always the bad guy in the situation if we're, lumping in the military with the US government. Because the military wasn't really like portrayed that heavily in any of those movies, save for Captain America 1 and Iron Man. In almost every situation, the military here is not shown in a positive light. There are so many other better movies he could have used as an example. I know that that's petty of me to like point that out, but I just want to point that out. Not only is he wrong about the movies that he chose to use as an example, but like there are so many other better movies that he could have given as an example of military propaganda. He did use Top Gun as an example. He already used that one. He exhausted the one good example and apparently couldn't think of any more. Transformers would have been a much better example. Also, thank you, Reza Sutra, for gifting Alphanaut a tier 1 subscription. Thanks so much. That's about all I've got with regards to critiquing the actual video here. Rain did seem like she wanted to come on and talk about this. So, how are you, Rain?
Yay. Mad.
I imagine you probably would be.
Not at anybody in chat, but mad.
All right, let's go.
All right. So I think the thing I hate the most about a lot of this discourse is that we don't have to be dishonest, misleading, and obtuse, and incredibly vague in our criticisms of the military-industrial complex. And we also don't have to be Amerocentric in our criticisms of the military-industrial complex on a global scale either, which is something that I see time and time again, that, you know, with tankies, for example, that are up China's butt or Russia's butt, that, you know, America bad, but whatever Russia does is fine, whatever China does is fine, whatever any other country does is fine, just whatever we do is bad. And it's like, well, if you have any actual moral and ethical consistency, you would say that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is wrong and bad because they are the aggressor, period, end of story. And that in this specific instance, the United States was actually specifically requested by the leader of that nation, who reached out to NATO, to the United States, to the European Union, and requested aid and support. We weren't going to really do much of anything. I really hate these types of, you know, tanky babies first, as you said, babies first anarchists, these types of anarchists that they want to critique the military, but they do so from just such an incredibly dishonest way, right? And they do so from such an infantilizing way.
Yeah.
When I went in from 2003 to 2008 in the United States Navy. When I went in, I was a high school dropout with a GED, living in government housing with just me and my dad, making a few $100s a month. I had nowhere else to go. Nowhere else to go. And I'm not the only person that when I went in, most everybody that was in my division, my recruit training division at the you know, when I went into the Navy, most everybody had reasons. They knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted education. They didn't want to go pay for college. They wanted to join because the military would pay for college. They didn't have much of anything else to do in life. They were dropouts. They were homeless. They were, you know, people that there were the people that were all hoorah and, you know, let's go get the bad guys and stuff. Sure, that happens, and that's a thing. But most everybody I knew was like, hey, I'm going to get free medical care. I'm going to get free education. I'm going to get free food, free clothing, a free place to sleep, and a 1 in 10 chance that I'm actually in a combat environment in which I am shooting a weapon at another human being who is also shooting their weapon back at me. And most everybody knew that. So number one, I take issue with the infantilization of people who, at the time that they make the decision to join the military, are seen as that we're so propagandized and so blind to everything that no one could possibly join the military knowing everything that gets put out in the video. That's just not true.
Well, and it's also not really bad because Renegade Cut does in the video kind of dismiss the idea that you should even join the military for those reasons to begin with. So it's like, not only is he infantilizing people who join the military, he's also dismissing like the actual real legitimate reasons why people would want to join the military, and then also applying all of this moral weight to military servicemen as being like participating in war crimes.
Yes, and then of course, you know, once the war crime thing, right? The war crime thing is something that really just infuriates the hell out of me, right? Because I was first and foremost what we call an undesignated deck seaman aboard a U.S. Navy warship, a warship that never fired in anger against any target the entire time that I was on board that ship. And even if it had, would that have made me a war criminal because I was one of several hundred individuals making that ship run? Number two, after that, I transitioned to becoming a medical professional in the military and ended up working at a hospital, Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth, Virginia. You know what I did? I started my career at the Naval Medical Center in Portsmouth, Virginia, as a patient administrative and records keeping assistant.
Wait, are you telling me that you didn't personally destroy thousands of civilians in a foreign country as a medical professional?
Correct. So I did patient administration and records keeping first. After that, I moved to complicated OBGYN, maternal infant child, neonatal intensive care, prenatal and postnatal care, and then did some other bits and pieces here and there before I willfully discharged. And I have an honorable discharge, and I am a disabled veteran with a disability, with a bad injury. I was hurt twice, and with PTSD. But my specific issue here is that Article 8, under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, which discusses war crimes, what war crimes are. I feel like I'm doing a little bit of hardcore debate bro, loner box level debate bro stuff here. But just to say that everybody in the military does war crimes, right? There's the people that say that obviously don't know what a war crime is, number one. And number two, don't understand the implication that has to somebody, right? So like, what is a war crime? Usually war crimes means what they call grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions. That means willful killing, torture or inhumane treatment, including biological experimentation, willfully causing great suffering, extensive destruction and appropriation of property not justified by military necessity and carried out unlawfully and wantonly, compelling a prisoner of war or other protected person to serve in forces of hostile power, willfully depriving a prisoner of war or other protected persons of rights of fair and regular trial, unlawful deportation or transfer or unlawful confinement, and taking hostages. Those are the primary breaches of Article 8, which is the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court as defined by the United Nations. Those are the 8 primary understandings, and then there are other serious violations of law. I also noticed that these individuals never talk about the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Do you know what that is?
I do not.
So the Uniform Code of Military Justice, otherwise known as the UCMJ, is a guiding article system that guides conduct within the United States Department of Defense. The UCMJ has multiple punitive articles. These articles range from accessory after the fact to public records offenses to larceny to fraudulent use of credit cards to robbery to kidnapping to assault, you name it, right? There's literally hundreds of articles underneath the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I myself was actually brought up on a Uniform Code of Military Justice infraction for falsification of official government documentation. The situation that happened there is that as a hospital corpsman acting as an assistant to a registered nurse, in which we were a nurse corpsman duo. She had 4 patients. I had 4 on a maternal infant child ward, and where I was taking care of 4 moms and 4 newborns, and she was taking care of 4 moms and 4 newborns. I, and having worked over 12 hours, stated that in my nursing notes that I had given the patient a medication as prescribed at the time that it was supposed to be given, right? So if the doctor says every 4 hours and it's time to give the medication and I give the patient the medication, I'm supposed to document that. Because again, a lot of people don't realize that we document absolutely everything. I stated that I had given the patient her medication at 8 o'clock. I had done so 10 minutes prior.
Oh no.
So I had falsified official government documentation, which was my oopsie and thinking it was 8. Now, thankfully, an investigation was launched. I was brought before Captain's Mast, as it is called. I was brought for a UCMJ infraction. And an investigation had shown that not only did I actually retrieve the medication as was required from our Pixis station, as it was stated, not only did I go into the patient's room, make sure the patient was okay. The patient stated that I had, in fact, given her medication. The only thing I had done was simply just oopsed that it was I was off by like 10 minutes. That's it. That's all I had done. My career could have ended on the spot.
Can't believe you would commit such a war crime.
Exactly. So when we talk about these types of things, right, like people don't have, I think, the level of understanding of why there's a lot of veterans, for example, who get really pissy when cops go, hey, I was afraid for my life. I was afraid for my life. I was afraid for my life. And it's like, yeah, well, I've got to go through 11 different steps and make a phone call before I'm allowed to shoot you, because if I do, I'm going to a courts martial general. I'm probably going to federal penitentiary for the rest of my life. But, hey, go off, queen. Like, you were afraid for your life, sure, but I hate all of this because it's not talking about specifics. It's not talking about the 24 veterans a day, every day that commit suicide. It's not talking about the specific rates of PTSD. It's not talking about the specific funding in the Veterans Affairs Administration, which, by the way, is asking for $368 billion this year, which is the most money that the Veterans Affairs Administration has ever asked for, meaning it's not underfunded.
Well, it's also not even taking into account that all of the things that people like Renegade Cut will often bring up as problems with the military are things that are easily fixed. Like, it's not stuff that, like, the fix is not like abolish the military. These are actual real policy points that we can actually address.
Yeah. It's incredibly frustrating to, like, especially on Twitter, right? When you see somebody say, like, make the war crimes jokes, right? And the the war criminal joke, right? And then people respond, and then people go, well, they didn't say everyone's a war criminal that joins the military. No. Sure, I'll grant you that.
I mean,
but in some cases they do.
Anyone who's been on my stream for long enough knows that was actually the case.
Yes, it was actually said. I got called a war criminal multiple times directly.
Yeah, I damn. I can't believe I'm talking to a war criminal right now.
I know, right? Like, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I don't think you quite, like, it's that whole, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yeah. Oh, wait, really, Paco? The very first person in the tweet thread you read called Rico Rants a war criminal? Oh my God.
Wow.
Of fucking course.
All of this, like, I worry that I'm going to ramble back and forth, like, and I did my due diligence, right? I know I turned the website off when I joined the call, so I have no idea what the hell chat's saying, and I don't care. There are a lot of people in chat that I love, but if I pay attention to them, I'm not going to be having a conversation with you. So it's, as the streamer, I leave it up to you to engage with chat, right?
For a scout, playing solitaire in the military is now a war crime.
Right. And again, like, when we talk about rates of injury, right? Everything is an injury. Everything is an injury. If it causes a decrease in readiness, it's an injury. You're out doing your PT for the day and you twist and sprain your ankle while you're out on the running track. That's an injury. That's a hospital encounter. That's, a sick shit. That's,
that was a thing
light
too.
duty.
That was a thing too. We noted when we were going over this that, like, somebody actually brought that up in the comments, and Renegade Cut straight up lied.
Yeah.
And said
he
that,
did.
Like, in his comments, like, straight up lied and said, no, that statistic is talking about, like, combat and training. And no, it is not.
No, it isn't. It straight up isn't. At the end of the day, the overall problem I have is as yours. The framing and tonality and focus of these types of video essay, video things that people are doing, right? Where they're not actually sitting back and looking at things from a proper statistical analysis, from a proper leftist analysis of, like, material conditions and environment, and the very real after effects, right, of what people go through once they're out of the military. Is the military bad? Yeah, absolutely. And I say that as somebody that joined and was there. Is it necessary? Yes. Sorry.
Yeah,
it is.
It just straight up is.
Do I wish it wasn't necessary? Yes. Yes, I do. Wholeheartedly. Do I think that there are some instances in which a military is absolutely necessary? Yeah. I mean, look at Ukraine, right? If Ukraine didn't have any military capability whatsoever, Russia would have just walked in and took it all. That would have been the end of it. That's the same for every other former Soviet bloc nation that doesn't want to return to being a part of Russia. And I have to ask these people the same question that the Twitter thread asked. Are you okay with this? Are you okay? Yes or no? And this is one of those situations where you don't let them weasel out of the question. You keep asking the same question until you get a yes or no answer, because it is a yes or no answer. Are you okay with one sovereign nation invading another sovereign nation? Yes or no? Period. End of conversation. If the answer is no, then it's no for every country on the planet, including ours.
I'm against imperialism when it's America.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm only against imperialism when it's America. When it's everybody else, imperialism's bad, period. I don't understand why that's a cancelable take. Imperialism, warmongering, all those things, it's all bad, period. No matter who does it, it's bad.
Have you considered, Rain, that the real war crime is war, and if you are a part of war, you are committing a war crime?
I have considered that. That is an interesting point of view, I will say. When I got people on Twitter that are mutuals saying, "Oh, we are both war criminals, me and you included. Even the lunch lady is a war criminal," and I'm like, "You've got to be fucking kidding me."
I mean, to be fair, some food is a war crime.
That's true, but here's the thing, right? So people talking about you're not going to have time for luxuries and things, right? Which is something that's not just been said in your chat, it's been said elsewhere. It's just not true. When I worked at Naval Medical Center Portsmouth, our food court had a fucking Pizza Hut and a Taco Bell and a KFC in it. Like, in the building, in the hospital, we had Pizza Hut and Taco Bell and KFC and like a big giant commissary and an exchange that we could go and buy freaking consoles and music and like. Let me ask you a question. If I'm only getting paid $20,000 a year, but none of that money is going to health insurance, none of that money is going to student loans, none of that money is because I'm getting it what we call a basic allowance for housing because I live off base because I'm married. So none of that money is going to paying for housing because I get paid extra for housing. And I get paid per diem to drive to and from work. I get paid what we call BAS, basic allowance for subsistence, because I don't eat at the base commissary in the base cafeteria. I eat off base, which means they get me like $300 or $400 a month for groceries. I don't pay for any of my uniforms. It just kind of comes out of my, whatever. Right? What else am I doing with the $23,000 I'm being paid?
Oh, yeah.
What am I doing with it? I had a BMW. My first car was a BMW 325 Ci that I bought as an E3 in the Navy because what the fuck else am I doing with my money? I was like, when I listened to this video this morning, I was out taking a walk, and I remember when that take came on into the video, you can make more working retail. I literally stopped what I was doing and was like, what are you talking about? It's just demonstrably false. It's so wrong on so many levels. Even if I was charitable to the take that yes, technically in some areas of the country you could make more total working in retail or fast food. Cost of living is a thing. And the other thing is so you get what's called a leave and earnings statement, right? And you get paid on the 1st and the 15th. Yeah. Like clockwork at midnight, 1st and 15th every month. You know exactly when your money's coming in. And you get a leave and earnings statement every time you get paid. And your LES will say your base pay, which mine as an E3 was at the time, it was less than it is now, but it'll say base pay, number one, and then it'll start to say everything else. Basic allowance for housing. Mine was $1,200 a month extra just for rent. Then it'll say basic allowance for subsistence, which mine was again $300, $400 a month just for food. Then it'll talk about your per diem, which is your like travel funds. Then it'll talk about whether or not you're in a combat environment, whether or not it's taxed, what your actual leave earnings are, because you earned like a few days a month of leave that you could go on, where you could just take leave and go. And then it starts like going like an itemized full breakdown of everything that you're paying you. And when you think somebody my age joining at 19, I get free healthcare, I get free education, I get gas money, I get food money, I get rent money, and then I get $20,000 a year.
Yep.
In short, I was actually making closer to $40,000 to $50,000 a year. So it's just wrong. Period. Yeah. And when you talk about it like that, the average person is going to think, "Holy shit, what a deal!"
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like somebody mentioned in chat earlier, like people would not join the military if it didn't pay.
Exactly. And it's not that it pays. Again, it depends on the job. Mm-hmm. You also get bonuses for re-enlisting, big ones. Mm-hmm. You get bonuses for certain jobs. I had a friend of mine that went nuclear, got $120,000 enlistment and sign-on bonus.
Jesus.
On the spot, paid untaxable right into their bank account. $120,000 right then and there on the spot. All their schooling paid for, all their travel paid for, all their food, all their uniforms, all their cost of living, plus the fact that they were fast-tracked to E4, plus the fact that by the time they actually got out of school 3 to 4 years later, they were going to have time in service, which increases the amount of money that you get every year. Yeah, okay, and if you're lucky enough to be deployed, and being in any sort of support operation or even active duty, well, then your entire leave and earnings statements when you're deployed are untaxable. By the way, the military gets taxed. I had to pay state and federal taxes. So I'm kind of paying myself. Right? Like I got paid and then had to pay state and federal and local. And some cities and some states don't care about any of that. But I still had to pay taxes.
Me when I pay myself.
Exactly. Right. And so I know it sounds like, I'm sure there are going to be people maybe in chat or in comments or whatever. They're like, "Oh, Rayne's pro-military." I'm not. I'm pro-truth and honesty. Be honest and accurate in your criticisms.
Yeah.
Talk about the suicidality from a point of true numbers and true data and true analysis of how it is affecting veterans.
And talk with about like actual prescriptions on how to fix it.
Talk about sexual assault, talk about homelessness, talk about the VA from like certain other situations too, because the VA where I live was literally the first VA hospital ever built, and it's one of the largest VA hospitals in the country. Mm-hmm. It's not only not understaffed and not underfunded, it's actually undergone multiple renovations.
Yeah.
So but somebody living maybe 100 miles away from here might be in a satellite clinic, which is understaffed and underfunded. Mm-hmm. But the hospital's not.
I do want to address something that I saw in chat earlier, but I didn't read it off because I wanted you to have time to
rant. Sorry.
Yes. But no, I want you to rant. People need to hear this shit. And you have way more experience than I do with this. Min Ayakel. Okay. If Renegade Cut's take was abolish the military, then I fully disagree with that. My take was that I just don't think he was saying that exactly. Obviously, if nobody joined the military, that's what would happen, but I don't think don't join the military is quite the same as it would be good if nobody joined the military. I need you to please reread that last sentence because both of those things are the same thing.
Yes, they are.
Like, it would be good if nobody joined the military is functionally abolish the military. That's my contention here.
Distinction without a difference.
Yes, it is a distinction without a difference. Even if Renegade Cut isn't physically saying the words, we should abolish the military, the function of what he's arguing for is that the military would cease to exist. Renegade Cut is an anarchist, and his political prescription is that the military shouldn't exist. He's just not saying it because to say that would open him up to criticism that he can't substantiate against.
It would be my dream that the military would not exist and that no one would join it and that we wouldn't need it.
I would love if we didn't need a military.
I constantly tell people, imagine what we could achieve with no nations and no borders. Imagine where we would be as a species, as humanity. Just dream of the things that we would be doing and we would be capable of. Imagine we'd already be living on Mars. Imagine if it took you 2 weeks to travel to Mars. Imagine a 2-week trip to Mars, stay there for a month on vacation, and a 2-week trip back. Imagine if we were exploring the stars. Imagine if we were focused on developing just the most amazing renewable energy sources. Imagine the day that fusion energy comes online for real. I dream of that world. It's not anywhere near us. Right now, the military is a necessary evil. It must exist, because if it does not exist, those other individuals in the world who will have a military and use it for evil will use it. It's just as we see over and over again with Russia and Ukraine. The statement to the rest of the world is, if you don't have nuclear weapons, you are fair game. Because the only thing that keeps you from being invaded is that the other person doesn't want nuclear war.
Yep.
Because everybody's terrified of nuclear war.
Yep.
Despite all of the major simulations showing that it would kill about 1 billion people over 10 years and humanity would survive. Now, that's neither here nor there, and that probably came off a little bit weird, me saying that. But the point being, if the the military needs to exist. I wish it didn't. Truly, I do. But then we've also put ourselves in a position where if we vacate a lot of the places we've put ourselves in, we leave a power vacuum and we endanger people. Imagine if the United States military as a whole pulled out of Japan and left Japan to their own devices. You don't think China and North Korea would take immediate action? You don't think the Japanese people would be in an incredible amount of danger? Imagine if we pulled out of the entirety of South Korea. Should we have gotten involved in Korea? That's a completely different conversation. Obviously, my personal opinion is probably not. But if we pull out now, you don't think North Korea and China will immediately take advantage of that situation?
Yeah, that is like a really frustrating part of a lot of these discussions, is that like people like Renegade Cut will confuse should we have done thing to begin with looking at the effects of what happens now, because the problem is we can't change the decisions we've already made.
Nope.
But we can affect what happens afterwards, and so we have to work with the best that we can with the information that we have and with the consequences that we've already caused. Yes, with Tetra, we live in a society.
We just so happen to live in a society, right? Like we're in a situation in which we've screwed up so much that we've placed ourselves in positions in which other people actually do depend on us. And for example, Japan, I've been to Japan, and I've been to Japan walking off of a military installation out into the public to speak to Japanese people. And I can tell you that the Japanese are not fond of our presence when it comes to American military in the places where the American military is. Outside of that, it's a different story. For example, Yokosuka Naval Air Station. Most of the people outside were polite, but not overly fond of the American Navy. Out in Tokyo, on the other hand, completely different story. Osaka, Odawara, different areas out there, a little bit of a different story, right? Now, that could have changed because that was a long time ago. That was years ago. But, it's if we leave Germany, if we leave Japan, if we leave South Korea, should we leave? That's an interesting conversation to be had, I think. Should we pull all of our bases out and pull all of the military back to the United States? Another interesting conversation. But I want people to really, truly, honestly sit and think about what happens if we do. Because these are very, very different conversations, as you said. Very different conversations based on, okay, should we have done the thing that we did 60 years ago? No, probably not. Well, okay, so we should just leave now then. Well, yeah, but if you talk to any of my Belarusian friends, they don't want us to leave because they're terrified.
like I said, you have to consider, like, the moral question is a different question. What is right morally is going to necessarily be different with, like, what is either the best option that you can make or what is ethically correct. It's not always the same.
That's correct. Should we be spending nearly $700 billion a year on the military? No, we shouldn't. Should we be spending more than the next 27 countries put together? No. Do we need to? I would argue no. That's even saying and agreeing with the statement that that our military is a necessity. It is an evil, but it is a necessary evil. It needs to exist. Does it need to exist in its current form and at its current level of funding, et cetera, et cetera? No. Do we need another $14 billion aircraft carrier? No. Do we need another $8 billion nuclear attack submarine? No, we've got like 200 of them. We don't need another one. Like, it's these situations where you slippery slope the argumentation of, well, the military needs to exist, therefore we need the N+1 number of nuclear attack submarines. Really? We need the 201st? Yes, absolutely. You realize that the next 30 countries put together that have submarines don't equal half of our submarine fleet. We outnumber the world 2-1 in terms of the number of nuclear attack submarines that we have access to. Yes, but the military needs to exist and we need to defend ourselves. This is the problem with that, is like, you can make the statement that yes, the military needs to exist, but then people will run away with it. And that's, in my opinion, one of the major problems with all of this, is that people never actually bring that into the analysis either, that people run away with the statement and be like, yeah, the military needs to exist because if it didn't, people would hurt us. That's true. It's just true. People would hurt us. Look at every other country that's done every other thing. If you don't have the ability to defend yourself, somebody will take advantage of it. Period. It's this weird thing that pisses me off about anarchists. This view that the world is all fluffy rainbows and daisies and everybody would just get along and nobody would hate one another for any reason whatsoever. It's just not true. It's not the way the world works.
Yeah, it's a nice sentiment, but it's not something that we can necessarily achieve. And it's not something that, like, even if it was achievable, I don't know that it's something that's worth, like, focusing our, like, attention and energy into when we have, like, other things that need addressing.
Yeah.
Like, the problem with the utopian ideal is, like, in order to get to the utopia, you have to do all of the other smaller things to get there. Like, you can't just make a utopia. And, like, that is the problem that I have with a lot of like the discourse around this, like the war crimes discourse and the you know, the military funding and all of that, is that, like, there are real problems with the military industrial complex. And like you said, people will, you know, run away with the like, you know, we need the military to exist, obviously. So let's just, you know, pour every amount of money into it that we can. But, like, people will run away with that. On the opposite side too, people run away with the, you know, well, the military does bad things, so, you know, we should just get rid of it. Not to play radical centrist or anything, but, like, I don't think either one of these are particularly helpful things. And it's like, if we want to address the problems that the military has in it, let's actually address the problems. Let's address the suicide rate. Let's address the homelessness issue. Let's address the problems with, you know, healthcare. Let's address the way that our country, like, historically has treated veterans after they leave the service. Let's address the way that the military, like, misrepresents things and recruiting people and that kind of thing. We can do those things. But the solution is not to just say, don't join the military. There are reasons why people might want to. Ultimately, the military is going to exist one way or the other. The best solution that we can have is to try to fix the issues with it.
But, you know, it could be argued that there is no fixing the issues with it.
Yeah, I don't believe that. There are always going to be issues that are just unfixable, but, you know.
I hate all of it. Because the thing that, when I see stuff like this, the thing that I always think as a veteran is, this person doesn't actually give a shit about me, or anything that I went through, or anything that I'm going through now. This is content. This is circus. This is performance. There's no legitimate care.
Well, it's clear to me that people like Renegade Cut have both never served in the military and have never known someone who has.
That's what it feels like. You know, it's why, like, I don't know how many times when I'm out about, especially on certain days like Memorial Day or whatever, where I have to don't people are thank you for service, and I go, don't do that, don't, because you don't mean it. You don't mean it. You think it makes you look good in front of everybody else, and if you thank me for my service, and I turn around and say, I don't know what I'm doing for food today, would you do anything? If I said my fridge is empty and I have a child that needs to eat, can you help me? Would you? My car needs help and I can't afford it. I'm unemployed and disabled. I make $150 a month for a 10% disability. Would somebody, actually care if I was really bad mentally that day and thinking bad things? Don't thank me for my service. You don't mean it. You don't care. And don't advocate for me from this position of moral and ethical superiority about why the military should and shouldn't exist. And hey, look at all the harm it does to people. Yeah, it does a lot of harm to a lot of people. What are you doing about it besides making a video essay on YouTube to make yourself sound morally and ethically superior to everyone else, while calling every veteran that's ever served a war criminal, not realizing what that actually sounds like when a veteran hears that?
And not actually knowing what it means either.
And the whole dilution of the word, of the definition, of the meaning of the thing, the war crime that is laid out in international law that talks about imprisonment and deportation and torture and things like that, and willful wanton destruction of things that are not military targets and military necessity. But of course, again, these types of things, as with all law, like, well, you could be like, well, I thought it was a necessity, and of course do dumb shit like the US does. I want people to discuss this from a position of honest sincerity. That's why it gets frustrating. I want them to discuss it from a position of true leftism, of understanding that there needs to be a multi-level, holistic, material analysis of why people join.
I am right there with you.
I also want to feel like people actually give a shit.
Would be nice, wouldn't it? Especially like people like Renegade Cut that has like so much actual like influence on this site. Like that's also like the biggest problem here too. It's not even just that Renegade Cut made a bad video, it's that Renegade Cut made a bad video and has 300,000 subscribers. And yeah, only a like small portion of that base is probably actually going to see the video. But like, Jesus Christ, come on, dude. Talk to one veteran before making your video.
Just one. I volunteer as tribute, but they won't talk to me because I'll critique and criticize and push back on things. Because I'm nearly 40. I don't care anymore. Like, I've watched people die. It is what it is. So like I don't tolerate these types of individuals that take this level of analysis, quote unquote, to, well, very many and some, and because it's almost blue MAGA in my opinion. It's almost Trumpian. Well, how many veterans? Well, many veterans are saying. How many?
That's a perfect point. Like, it really honestly is blue MAGA shit.
Yeah, it's like, well, you're very likely to be hurt. Well, how likely? What type of hurt? Well, you're being pedantic. You're just very likely. No, explain it to me, please. I'm being pedantic. I want to know. Well, you're also likely to commit suicide. Really? How likely? I can tell you that number, 24.
You're being pedantic. Well, yeah, being pedantic in this case matters because we're talking about stuff with actual statistics.
Stuff with actual statistics, actual reports, actual agencies whose entire job it is to track. The military is bad. It's evil. It does horrible things. It breaks people. But it needs to exist.
And as long as it exists, we owe it to ourselves to make it as good as we possibly can.
Exactly. And as long as it exists, we owe it to ourselves to look at each person individually and understand why they joined. And to ask ourselves, was this person truly manipulated or not? Should we be infantilizing this person or looking at them from a position of, what else was me, the indigenous kid living off the res in government housing with a disabled father who just got out of being homeless, who dropped out of high school and got a GED and had no real future. What was I going to do? When I ask that question of people that make these statements about how I'm a war criminal and I joined and I did all these other things, the answer is usually you could have just went and got a job somewhere.
Well, that's literally the options that Renegade cut like makes in the video.
Yeah.
Like he literally just goes into, well, you like, what was one of them? He talks about like college. He's like, well, what if you wanted to go to college? He was like, well, you could just take out student loans.
Yeah, because that's a very leftist anarchist thing to be like, just take out $100 and some $1,000 in student loan debt.
Yeah, just get some student loan debt, forehead. Like, holy shit, how are you this bad at making a video essay?
I joined because I had no other options, because my father was sick. I sent a lot of money home to Dad before he passed away. What else was I going to spend it on? I wasn't going to spend it on my mother because, you know, my mom and I were estranged. So, you know, my dad was at home alone in a multi-level apartment living next to an Air Force base in Ohio, and all he had was me. Well, what else was I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Go work at KFC like I did when I was 16, making $6-7 an hour for 20 hours a week? It's just that talk to one vet.
Well, and it's also like it's also like, if you want these like problems to be solved, right? If you want to encourage people to not join the military, there are like reasons why people join the military. Focus on those.
Yeah.
Homelessness, poverty, income insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are all actual fixable problems. But no, let's just sit here and, you know, wax poetic about why the military shouldn't exist. Why you should just take student loans instead of joining if you can't afford college.
The vast majority of people that join the military would not do so if there were not incredibly enticing benefits to doing so. Look at any kid.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to get some country bumpkins from wherever going yeehaw and hoorah all the way, got to kill the bad guys? Sure. That'd be a lie to say that doesn't happen. I've met a few of them. But are most people going to be like...
family?
Huh?
I mean, I have a few of them in my family.
Yeah, me too. But are most people that join the military be like, hey, that whole free college is kind of nice. That free healthcare is kind of nice. That very low chance of actually being in combat is actually kind of nice.
Well, and it's also something that, like, to my understanding, a lot of the like cultural thing that people get hung up over with like the military, that is really dependent on what branch of the military you join too, right?
Mm-hmm. It is. I was in the Navy. How likely do you think it is for the two situations that I told you that I was going to be in combat, being aboard a ship and being at a hospital, a stateside hospital, by the way, that was a major trauma center that on average, when I worked maternal, infant, child, we birthed over 400 children a month because we were the major like trauma center for the entirety of the military independence and etc. So like, yeah, I just, I don't want to stun lock and loop. And I know you've got other content to go to, and you know, I should get going because, you know, I'm annoying as it is, but
you're not annoying.
Thank you. If we're going to critique the military, can we please do it from a position of honesty? Because to me, this type of critique from this individual is no different from, hey, Saige, did you hear that red dye number 5 causes cancer? Oh, it does. It does. Yeah. Yeah. So the study came out saying that red dye number 5 causes cancer. Oh, can I see that study? Hey, wait, this study says that they put a 6,000% solution of this dye into mice and it caused the mice to develop cancer. Yeah. And that as a human being, you'd have to drink 202 liters in the span of 30 something days to have that same level of concentration, and the risk of a cancer increase would double from 5% to 10%. Well, but they say that it causes cancer.
Have you considered that many people have gotten cancer after having red dye number 5?
How about as leftists, we go back to venerating critical thinking?
Mm-hmm.
We go back to proper research. We go back to vetting our sources and being like, hey, this source agrees with me, except all of its processes, all of its data collection, all of its methodology is all wrong. So maybe I throw it out, even though it agrees with me.
Yeah.
Like you should do, because it's bad methodology, it's bad science, it's bad data. If I want to be honest and thorough, and as a video essayist,
we're here. Let me pick out one source that no, guys, I swear it totally agrees with me, except for all of the parts of the thing that completely disagree with me, except for the one sentence that I cherry picked.
That's something else I see with all these video essayists too, is like they'll pick an essay and be like, hey, they'll pick a study and be like, hey, look, the study agrees with me. And then you go look at the study because they link the study as a source. And it's like, yeah, it agrees with you on like point number 8, but the other like 23 points it doesn't agree with you on. Why didn't you mention that?
Or in like
that's the question, you know.
in some cases, like in this video, like Renegade Cut does make a lot of claims that he just does not source.
And it doesn't back up with any sort of.
Or in some cases will like make like the sources that he'll use will be like actual like books. So it's not something that you can just readily access to fact check or like look into. It's something that you actually have to like either, you know, go through means that I would never ever advocate for publicly on stream, or you have to like actually like pay for a book and like read a whole ass thing to be able to fact check.
It's incredibly frustrating.
Some of them
I've been called a right winger for saying these types of things, by the way. For saying no, you should do your research, you should do your due diligence, you should be honest and thorough and critical. You should throw studies out that don't agree, like studies out that agree with you, especially if they have bad methodology, and you can see that they have bad methodology. You should be searching for meta studies that give you a more broad spectrum view of things. Like if I brought 80 studies to you and 3 of them agreed with you and the rest of them didn't, you know, and then of course some people will be like, well, that's an argumentum ad populum, that this is just because all these studies agree with you, you're right. Well, actually, the fact that all these studies do agree with me does make me right.
I mean, that's just what like studies are.
Right. So like, if I dump 80 studies that say puberty blockers, like the 80 studies on puberty blockers, 78 of them say puberty blockers are not bad. And by the way, these are 70 something studies from 11 different countries and like 20 something different institutions over the span of like 40 years. And here's 3 studies, all from the United States or the UK, from specific people that commissioned the study with bad methodology and low, like, you know, sample sizes and et cetera, that say that puberty blockers are bad. Well, actually, like the 70 some odd studies that say that puberty blockers aren't would lead you to the conclusion that puberty blockers are not bad for kids, because they're not. Like, we just know that they're not. And that's what you should do, is like meta level studies if you're doing any sort of proper research whatsoever. But what would I know? I'm just a dumb little war criminal that's, you know, not really native because I don't sound like it and I pass white and whatever else people want to throw at me as of late on Twitter. So, you know.
Yeah.
Yay me. Anyway, thanks for having me on. I love you.
No, thanks for coming on. Like, and legitimately, first of all, you are the like first person I would call for something like this anyway. So, you know, whenever this discourse like rears its head again, you can best believe I'm going to sound the bat signal. And second of all, no, thank you for coming on, because like people desperately like need to hear from people who actually like know this shit. Like, yeah. I don't think I did that terrible of a job like going over all of this, but like people need to hear from people like you who actually have this experience and actually know like what the fuck you're talking about. Like it is important that is the case. So like, no, absolutely. Thank you for coming on.
Well, you know, I'm glad that you let me come on, but just remember, what's the old adage, right? That like we shouldn't just listen to people who speak from experience and no position of data or whatever BS people come up with now whenever you bring an expert on.
Hey, Twitter's been telling me to listen to people of color, so.
I mean, yeah, but they also say that because I'm mixed, I don't exist. So I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't be listening to me. Like,
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm listening to marginalized communities. I can say that as a white person.
That is true. That is true.
As a white person, I get to decide which marginalized voices are valid enough to listen to, and then pat myself on the back for listening to them.
That's true. The Tonto speak. Oh, fuck off, Aztec. I love you. Actually, no. Instead of speaking any sort of indigenous language, I'll be a weeaboo tonight and say "Oye, semenasai, minasan."
Indeed.
Bye-bye.
All right. Talk to you later.
Later.
That was awesome, by the way. Yeah, Chainsaw, this actually is my first guest. And what a guest. Briefly. The issue with Renegade Cut's video is it is dishonest in its framing on both how the military functions, the reasons why people join the military. It infantilizes people who join the military while also applying a level of like agency to them that I don't know that you can actually justify. It contradicts itself, and it's just dishonest. It gives false information. It doesn't know how the military functions. It doesn't know the actual statistics. It just gives the, let's be real, very biased and filled with an agenda opinions from Renegade Cut as if they are fact, without any justification. And I believe that is a problem. Because honestly, this is the thing. I used to be a pretty big fan of Renegade Cut, and I kind of fell out mostly because my political views changed over a long time. I am no longer as strongly, that left leaning in terms of the anarchist prescriptions. I obviously have a lot of sympathies towards anarchist prescriptions, but I used to have a lot of respect for Renegade Cut, and it seems like this video really highlights a lot of the problems with video essayists in general, at least in the sphere, but with his ability to make content like this, because he can't admit his own biases or admit his agenda. And it is a bad video. Anyway, yeah, that is all I've got. Thank you to LadyRayneCloud for coming on and talking about this with me, because it was very frustrating, and I know it was even more frustrating for her. And also, you should go follow her and be nice and tell her nice things. Hi, thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider leaving a like, comment, and subscribing to the channel. And if you want to support the channel further, consider leaving a donation at streamlabs.com/SaigeAlexis/tip, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or going to patreon.com/SaigeAlexis and becoming a patron. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.